In the realm of heart-to-heart connections, join me as we explore the art of building and sustaining healthy, fulfilling relationships. For the preceding days, Charlotte had been experiencing a slight decline in her well-being. She contemplated canceling her best friend's out-of-town birthday party due to this, but at the last moment, she relented, convinced that things would go well. Her optimism was boosted by her recent acquisition of an exquisite dress that complemented her curvaceous figure perfectly. Over the preceding months, Charlotte had been gaining weight at an alarming pace, with diets proving ineffective in stemming the tide. In a somewhat melancholic jest, she even remarked that she seemed to gain weight from the mere sight of water or from merely sitting at the dinner table. Amidst the festivities, Charlotte gazed contemplatively at the effervescent champagne bubbles in a tall glass while another toast was raised in honor of the birthday girl. Unexpectedly, a surge of pain washed over her, catching her off guard. She rose from the table and sought solace on the balcony, hoping the fresh air would provide relief. However, her steps were cut short by an intense, cramping wave of agony that forced her to bend over. Noticing her distress, her friend interrupted her husband's congratulations and hurried to Charlotte's side. The widening horror in her friend's eyes was a reflection of Charlotte's suffering. Recognizing the severity of the situation, her friend swiftly called for an ambulance, realizing that everyone was inebriated to some degree and arranging a taxi would be challenging. With care, they settled Charlotte onto a couch, but the excruciating pain made it impossible for her to find a comfortable position. The duration until the ambulance's arrival felt interminable, each moment stretched to its limit. The thought of impending doom loomed heavily as Charlotte grappled with intense contractions. When the ambulance finally arrived, Charlotte was utterly drained from the relentless waves of pain, struggling to contain her screams. The youthful paramedic swiftly assessed Charlotte, checking her pulse and abdomen, and inquired about the duration of her pregnancy while studying her face intently. "How many weeks?" he asked. Perplexed, Charlotte responded, "Pregnant. Having actual contractions. But it can't be." Her words were a faint whisper, her lips drained of color, and a warm trickle ran down her legs. Observing the distressing scene, both the paramedic and his colleague acted promptly, aiding Charlotte into the waiting ambulance. The siren blared as the driver accelerated, a sense of urgency pervading the vehicle. In his 2 decades of ambulance driving, the driver had never encountered a situation where an adult woman was in labor to this extent. Glancing at Charlotte, the medical professional removed his watch and began to time the contractions. Around 15 minutes had passed on the highway when he gave the command to halt. As the vehicle pulled into a small parking area, the driver turned around, his surprise evident. The realization struck that they were still some distance away from the hospital. "We can't make it to the hospital," the doctor explained, clarifying that she was already in active labor. The driver radioed for critical care paramedic backup, recognizing the gravity of the situation. The paramedic scrutinized the woman undergoing labor once more. She observed the young man's struggle to steady his trembling hands and found herself beseeching a higher power. Who could have foreseen that a single night spent with a man would spiral into such a harrowing ordeal? And how could she, a seasoned mother of 2, have remained oblivious to her own pregnancy? Meanwhile, the doctor, his demeanor reassuring, offered a smile and advised, "If it helps, feel free to let out a scream. Let's begin the pushing and breathing." 10 minutes later, the resounding cry of an infant reverberated through the vicinity. The jubilant doctor expeditiously examined and attended to the premature yet surprisingly resilient newborn. Just as he was about to extend his congratulations to the mother on the unexpected yet favorable outcome of her pregnancy, he realized that the labor pains had not abated. "Don't let your guard down, my dear. It appears you're carrying multiple babies," he informed Charlotte. Panic gripped her heart, and with renewed determination and prayers, she recommenced the arduous process of pushing. Within 5 more minutes, a second baby entered the world. The perinatal intensive care team that had arrived applauded the tenacity of the mother, who was laboring beyond her years, and commended the paramedic for adeptly managing a complex scenario. Swiftly, the newborns were transferred into a specialized vehicle, destined for the maternity hospital. Charlotte was subsequently transported to the same hospital. The infants were situated within a sterile incubator designed for premature babies, and loved ones were granted permission to visit the new mother. Her daughter, Paisley, and her husband, Wyatt, were the first to arrive. Paisley was taken aback and struggled to comprehend how her mother could have remained unaware of her twin pregnancy. Charlotte's response was a somber apology. "It's because of my weight. I thought I was simply gaining pounds, and that's why I tried dieting." When Paisley inquired about the father, Charlotte merely shook her head. This silence irked Paisley, who felt her mother was withholding crucial information. She turned to her husband, seeking his support, and her raised eyebrows signaled her astonishment. "What's going on?" Paisley asked. Wyatt met her gaze, his complexion pale, and presented his cell phone screen. The compassionate nurse on duty had taken photographs of the newborns for Charlotte since she wasn't permitted to visit them yet. Those were the images Wyatt was examining. Paisley too studied the pictures intently. Initially puzzled, she failed to grasp what was unsettling her husband. Then, as realization dawned, she shut her eyes briefly and cast an accusatory glare at her husband. "How could you?" she exclaimed. The infants in the neonatal intensive care unit bore distinctive birthmarks on their right shoulders, the very same marks her husband possessed. Indignant, he met his wife's gaze, attempting to justify himself. "Darling, please, you have to believe me. How could you even consider such a thing?" The young woman's finger jabbed angrily at the screen. Wyatt, his hands spread in helplessness, responded, "I don't know. These birthmarks have been a part of every man in my family for generations, my grandfather, my father, me. But I swear, I have no connection to your mother's children." Paisley, wearied by the ordeal, waved her hand dismissively and declared that she now saw the truth clearly. She announced her intention to initiate divorce proceedings and left the room, slamming the door behind her in frustration. In Wyatt's exasperation, he turned to his mother-in-law, entreating, "Please, try to make her understand. This is an awful coincidence. She's serious about divorcing me. I don't want to lose her, I love her." With that, he hurriedly followed Paisley, racing to catch up. Meanwhile, Charlotte wrestled with a profound sense of guilt and shame. She was terrified by her inability to disclose the identity of the children's father. The weight of the situation was overwhelming. Turning her face to the wall, she wept in silence. Through her tears, she recognized the reality of her 55 years, not 30, not as resilient as she once was. While she felt well presently, didn't smoke, and had no major health concerns, she couldn't help but worry about the years ahead. The prospect of a decade from now plagued her thoughts, intensifying her distress. Tired of her tears, Charlotte eventually turned her gaze to the ceiling and began recounting the events that led her into this complex predicament. In the period leading up to the wedding, there was an occasion when her daughter's fiancé invited Charlotte and Paisley to meet his father, who had raised him. This gentleman, Jackson, was a retired military officer and a widower. The ambience of their spacious countryside residence exuded an air of romance. Moreover, Wyatt's father possessed an astute and amiable demeanor that instantly endeared him to Charlotte. Following a formal dinner, the young couple ventured into town, leaving Charlotte alone with Wyatt's father. He managed to persuade her to spend the weekend at his residence. Succumbing to his charm in the morning, she allowed herself to be swayed, although she made it clear that a romantic relationship between them was not tenable. She swiftly departed, arranging for a cab and fleeing like a guilt-ridden young woman. Charlotte initially assumed her age would shield her from any repercussions, but her assumptions proved gravely mistaken. In a sudden moment of clarity, she composed herself, resolving to cease her tears. The twins necessitated a mother and a father. Retrieving her phone from beneath the pillow, she dialed Jackson's number, making an effort to conceal the tremor in her voice. She recounted the events to Jackson, and when she finished, silence hung on the line. Tentatively, Charlotte inquired if he had any response, prompting Jackson to request the address of the maternity hospital. He assured her he would be there soon. An hour later, he entered the room, bearing an enormous bouquet of flowers. "Oh, my dear," she thought. "I believed it to be a jest right up to the final moment, yet when I uttered your name and beheld the nurse's expression, the reality sank in." He drew near, peering into Charlotte's eyes before planting a tender kiss on her cheek. "Congratulations, Mommy. Enough tears now. Babies bring boundless joy. Don't fret, we'll navigate this together." Then, side by side, they gazed through the expansive ICU window at the infants cradled in the nurse's arms. "Yes, there's no reversing this," Jackson mused with a gentle chuckle. His mind wandered to the thought of their shared birthmark on both babies. "What shall we name them?" he pondered aloud. Meanwhile, a blissful smile graced Charlotte's features as she observed her own offspring. The forgotten elation of motherhood surged within her once again. A month onward, the contented parents took their now plump infants home. Jackson insisted on a move to the countryside, believing it was more fitting for the children to grow up amidst nature than within the haze of the city. Submerged in family life, Charlotte's concerns faded away. Shedding pounds and blooming with newfound beauty, perhaps a result of unexpected motherhood and love rekindled. Jackson's gaze toward her brimmed with vibrancy, contentment radiating from his eyes. He embraced the roles of father and husband with exuberance, regardless of their mature years. As events unfolded, the couple found that, indeed, things had a way of falling into place for the better. That's all for my story. I hope it made you laugh, cry, or wonder. If you want to see more of my stories, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell to stay updated on my new videos. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for me, please leave them in the comments section. I always appreciate your input and ideas. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Take care.